Margot Brooks folded the last of her evening gown into her suitcase and snapped the lock with a deep sigh of satisfaction. Her perfectly manicured fingers with dark maroon manicures slid over the glossy surface of the expensive luggage. A cruise was exactly what she needed. A break from routine, from dusty St. Albans, from the daily pretense. Derek's voice came from the bathroom, humming a tune. Margot wrinkled her nose. 7 years of marriage had turned her husband's once cute habits into a source of constant irritation. His optimism, his contentment with little, his endless devotion. It all choked her like a necklace that was too tight. "Ready, darling?" Derek appeared in the doorway with a towel around his shoulders and a wide smile on his face. "I can't believe we're finally going on this cruise. 7 days of true paradise." Margot squeezed out a smile. "Of course, honey. Everything is packed." Derek came over and hugged her from behind, nuzzling his face into the curve of her neck. "This is going to be our second honeymoon. I've missed you so much lately. It seems like we've grown quite distant from each other." Margot gently released herself from his embrace, keeping a mask of tenderness on her face. "You're right. We need time just for the two of us." Derek Brooks was a good man, that was the problem. Too good, too predictable, too ordinary. A high school math teacher who loved his job despite his modest salary, who made her breakfast in bed every Sunday, who planned their future in a little house with a white picket fence and a couple of kids. And Margot wanted more. She always wanted more. Margot's phone vibrated on the dressing table. She quickly grabbed it before Derek could notice the name on the screen. "I can't wait for you to get back. 7 days will be an eternity. M." She quickly deleted the message and typed back, "Be patient. Things will change soon." "Who are you texting with?" Derek asked, buttoning his shirt. "Just Janet from the office. Reminds me of the papers I need to sign when I get back," Margot lied without the slightest hesitation. Derek nodded, not showing a shadow of doubt. His trust was another thing that drove her crazy. At the airport, Margot was more nervous than usual. She double-checked passports, reservations, insurance. Derek noticed her anxiety and squeezed her hand gently. "It's going to be okay," he said. "We deserve this vacation." "You deserve so much more," Margot thought, but not the version of more that Derek was thinking. The flight to Miami, where the Pearl of the Caribbean cruise ship was waiting for them, went without incident. Margot spent most of the trip pretending to be asleep to avoid conversation. Derek read a book on pedagogy, occasionally casting affectionate glances at his wife. As they walked up the gangway to the ship, Margot froze for a moment, feeling a sudden surge of doubt. But then she remembered Malcolm, his confident touch, his promises of the future, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Not with the same condescending adoration as Derek, but with a hungry admiration. Malcolm wanted her as passionately as she wanted the life he could offer her. Their cabin was more spacious than Margot had expected. Panoramic windows, a separate bedroom, a jacuzzi on a small private balcony. "Wow," Derek whistled as he looked around the room. "You didn't tell me you'd booked a suite." Margot shrugged. "I wanted to surprise you. Decided to spend part of my annual bonus on something special." Derek put his arm around her. "You're amazing. I don't deserve a wife like that." "Really, you don't," Margot thought, but in a very different way. The first 2 days of the cruise went relatively smoothly. They sunbathed by the pool, participated in wine tastings, and visited the first port in the Bahamas. Derek was constantly taking pictures of Margot against the turquoise sea, palm trees, and sunset. She obediently smiled at the camera, thinking about how these pictures would look in court. A beautiful couple on vacation, no sign of trouble or conflict. On the third day, Derek noticed that Margot often went out on deck alone, phone in hand. Each time she returned a little agitated, with a blush on her cheeks. At first he put it down to the sea air and the sun. On the evening of the fourth day, they had dinner at the fancy restaurant on the top deck. Margot looked stunning in a dark blue dress with an open back. Derek couldn't take his eyes off her, thinking how lucky he was. "Do you remember how we met?" he asked, pouring her a glass of wine. Margot smiled. "Of course, in the college library. You helped me get a book off the top shelf. And then I spilled coffee on you," Derek added, laughing, "and offered to buy you a new blouse." And for some reason I said yes, Margot said, trying to remember the feeling she'd once had for this man. Had she ever really been in love with him? Or had she just succumbed to his persistent advances? You know, Derek continued, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and just look at you. And I can't believe you chose me. Margot sipped her wine to hide her sudden irritation. Derek had always been like that, sincere to the point of embarrassment. Never hid his feelings, never played games. That had once seemed refreshing to her. Now it just seemed boring. Are you doing okay, sweetheart? Derek asked, noticing her detachment. The last few weeks you've seemed, I don't know, distant. Margot shuddered. It's all right. It's just been a lot of work before vacation. Derek covered her hand with his. I know your new position at the insurance company requires more time, but remember, I'm always here for you if you ever want to talk. It was at that moment that Margot's cell phone, which was lying on the desk, vibrated. Derek casually glanced at the screen and saw the beginning of the message. Missed you, babe. Can't wait until we... Margot grabbed the phone lightning fast and shoved it into her purse, but it was too late. The expression on Derek's face changed. Bewilderment, then hurt, then slow realization. Who is it? He asked in a low voice. A coworker, Margot answered quickly. About a project we're working on. Babe? Derek looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. Your coworker calls you babe? Margot felt the situation spinning out of control. It's just an office joke, Derek. Don't pay it any mind. Let me see the phone. His voice was unexpectedly firm. What? No! Margot gripped her purse tighter. It's an invasion of privacy. Personal space? Derek grinned bitterly. We've been married 7 years, Margot. We have no personal space from each other. That's ridiculous. Margot tried to turn it into a joke. Are you jealous of the work correspondence? But Derek wasn't listening. He got up from the table. I need some air. Margot remained seated, her heart racing. This was not going according to plan. Too soon, too obvious. She pulled out her phone and texted Malcolm. There have been complications. Don't text me again for the rest of the cruise. When Margot returned to the cabin, Derek wasn't there. She spent the next 2 hours nervously waiting, preparing excuses, building a defense. When the door finally opened, the look on her husband's face told her all she needed to know. How long? He asked, stopping in the doorway. What are you talking about? Margot tried to act puzzled. Don't make an idiot out of me. Derek was unusually cold. I saw your correspondence with Malcolm. You left your phone unlocked when you went to take a shower. Margot froze. Years of lies, months of planning, all ruined because of one stupid mistake. It's not what you think, she began the standard phrase she'd used in her many cheating affairs. No? Derek pulled out his phone and began to read out. I can't wait for us to be together forever. As soon as you get back, we'll start a new life. Without him. Isn't that what I think it is, Margot? She changed her strategy on the fly. Okay. Yes, I'm having an affair. I was going to tell you after the cruise. I wanted us to have that last good moment together. One last good moment? Derek looked at her in disbelief. You're cheating on me, and you think we can have a good moment? I didn't want you to find out this way. The tears Margot squeezed out seemed almost real. I'm confused, Derek. I didn't know how to tell you. How long has this been going on? Margot hesitated. A few months. You're lying, Derek cut her off. There are messages from a year ago in the correspondence. Were you planning on leaving me all this time? Smiling at me, sleeping with me, planning this cruise, and all this time you knew you were going to leave? Margot changed tactics. What did you want? For me to spend my whole life in our little house with your teacher's salary? We never travel, never take risks. You're happy with your little life, and I'm not. Derek recoiled as if struck by a blow. So it's about money? Is that what this is about? Who is he, this Malcolm? He's a businessman, a successful one. He has his own company. Margot felt bitterness and bile rising in her. He can give me the life I deserve. The life you deserve, Derek repeated in a hollow voice. What about the vows we made to each other? What about for richer and for poorer? Those are just words, Derek. Margot couldn't hold back any longer. Words that everyone says, but no one wants poverty. No one! Derek looked at her with a long look. "I don't recognize you. Who are you?" "I'm a woman who wants more," Margot replied. "And I finally found a man who can give it to me." "And now what?" Derek asked, sinking down on the edge of the bed. "We go home and you just go to him?" Margot didn't answer. That wasn't part of the plan. The plan was different, much more definitive. They stepped out onto the balcony of the cabin, a heavy silence hanging between them. The waves raged below, the ship swaying slightly on the night sea. Derek stared into the distance and Margot looked at him. At his strong profile, at his lips pressed into a thin line. She knew he wouldn't give up without a fight. Not that type of man. He would fight for their marriage, try to win her back, make her happy. And when that didn't work, he would stand in her way to happiness with Malcolm. "What is it about him that I don't have in me?" Derek asked without turning around. "Ambition," Margot answered honestly. "Ambition. He's not afraid to take what he wants." "Am I?" "You're satisfied," she said, and it sounded like an accusation. "You never wanted more than we have." "Because I had everything I needed," Derek replied, finally turning to her. "I had you." Something in his eyes made Margot doubt for a moment. Then she remembered their small house, the boring weekends, his talk about the kids she never wanted. She remembered Malcolm's penthouse, his art collection, the champagne he'd ordered with a careless gesture as if it were tap water. "I deserve to be happy," she said. "And I don't?" Derek asked bitterly. Margot took a step toward him. "You'll find someone who appreciates your stability, who will want kids and a white picket fence." "I don't want anyone else," his voice trembled. "I love you, Margot. I always have. I always will." "It's not enough," she said, and those 3 words sounded like a sentence. Derek gripped the balcony railing, his knuckles turning white. "I'm not just going to let you go. We can work on our relationship. I can change." "It's too late." Margot could feel the adrenaline flowing through her veins. "It's now or never." "I love him." Derek shook his head. "No, you love what he can give you. That's not love, Margot. That's greed." The word slapped her like a slap. Greed, so simple, so primitive, he'd reduced all her desires, all her dreams. "You don't understand anything," Margot hissed, taking another step toward him. "I understand everything." Derek straightened up. "And I'm not going to let you use me and then throw me away like I'm worthless. If you want a divorce, fine, but I'm not going to make it easy for you. I'm going to tell everyone about your affair. I'll fight for every dime in court." Margot's face contorted with rage. "You wouldn't dare!" "I will." Derek looked more determined than ever. "You think I'm just going to stand back and let you and your rich lover make fun of me? I deserve better than that, Margot. I may not be ambitious in your sense, but I have pride." His words were like bullets, each one hitting the exact target. Everything she'd planned, everything she'd promised Malcolm was crumbling before her eyes. In the gift store on the ship, Margot bought a metal statue of a cruise ship, a small replica of the Pearl of the Caribbean. It stood on her bedside table, gleaming in the light of the lamps. Margot quickly grabbed the souvenir, feeling a pleasant heaviness in her hand. Derek turned and saw her with her hand raised, the metal object clutched in it. The bewilderment in his eyes was replaced by realization, but it was too late. Margot struck with all her might, putting all her rage, all the frustration of 7 years of marriage into that blow. The metal nose of the liner slammed into Derek's temple. He staggered, grabbing the railing to keep from falling. Blood trickled down his face. His eyes widened with shock and betrayal. "Margot!" He wheezed, raising his hand as if to defend himself from another blow. But no second blow was needed. The ship tilted on the strong wave. Derek, disoriented from the impact, lost his balance. Margot, seeing her chance, took a quick step forward and pushed him in the chest with both hands. One push was all it took, strong and fast. Derek didn't have time to react. His feet came off the deck, his body tumbled over the railing, and he disappeared into the dark abyss. Margot froze, listening. A splash, a scream. Then silence, broken only by the sound of the waves and distant music from the upper deck, where other passengers were enjoying a party under the stars. She slowly backed away from the railing, breathing heavily. Panic and relief struggled in her soul. It was done. There was no turning back. Now she must act quickly and coolly. Margot glanced at the souvenir in her hand. There was blood on the metal nose. She quickly went to the bathroom, washed the statue thoroughly, then treated it with an antiseptic wipe, wiping away any possible imprints. Afterward, she returned the souvenir to the bedside table, exactly where it had stood before. Margot examined the floor near the balcony door. There was blood there, a few drops forming a small path. She took a bottle of hydrogen peroxide from the bathroom, which was among the toiletries, and carefully applied it to the stains. The liquid hissed, foaming at the blood. After a few minutes, she blotted the treated areas with a cool, damp cloth, wiping away all traces. The towel she used to wipe the floor, Margot rinsed thoroughly in cold water before soaking it with soap. Glancing at her watch, she noted the time. 22 hours and 30 minutes. One would have to wait it out. Not too little to arouse suspicion, but not too much to keep the chance of rescue alive if Derek somehow miraculously survived. She pulled her phone out of her purse, erased all correspondence with Malcolm, then wrote one short message, "Done," then deleted it too. Margot sat on the edge of the bed, rehearsing an expression of shock and despair. In 30 minutes she would emerge from her quarters, disheveled and crying, screaming that her husband had disappeared. We'll beg for help, to organize a search. We'll play the role of a lifetime. I deserve to be happy, she repeated aloud like a mantra. The image of Derek falling overboard with an expression of horror and disbelief flashed before her eyes, but she resolutely pushed it away. No time for regrets. Only forward, toward a new life, toward the life she deserved. Derek Brooks's body was discovered at dawn. An elderly couple out for a morning walk on the Key West beach noticed something dark, tossed by the waves onto the sand. At first, they thought it was a garbage bag, but as they got closer, they saw the outline of a human body. 2 hours later, Detective Tricia Cavendish arrived on the scene. She silently examined the body, already covered with a tarp, then turned her gaze to the turquoise ocean. The sun was shining, a light breeze was blowing, palm trees swayed lazily in the distance. It seemed sacrilegious that tragedy had struck on such a beautiful day. "What have we got?" she asked the medical examiner who was leaning over the body. "Male, African American, age about 35, the examiner replied without raising his head. "The preliminary cause of death is drowning, but there is head trauma. Could have been caused by falling or hitting the hull of the boat. The ID on him is Derek Brooks from St. Albans." Tricia nodded, making notes in her notebook. "Time of death? Judging by the condition of the body and the water temperature, about 12 to 14 hours ago, between 22 hours and midnight." "What ship did he fall off of?" "Supposedly from a cruise ship, the Pearl of the Caribbean. They've already confirmed that a passenger named Derek Brooks is on the list and didn't show up for the morning pickup at Port Call." Tricia frowned. "Did you notify the wife?" "Yeah, she's on her way. The Coast Guard will have her here from the ship in an hour." Detective Cavendish took another look at the scene. Something about this picture didn't add up. The ocean had been relatively calm last night. A person would have had to lean heavily over the railing to fall. Accident? Suicide? Or... "I want a full toxicology report as soon as possible," she told the examiner, "and a detailed analysis of the head trauma. Could it have been inflicted before the fall into the water?" The examiner nodded. "Will do, detective." As Margot Brooks was carried to shore, Tricia watched her from a distance. The woman looked devastated. Disheveled hair, eyes swollen with tears, trembling hands. She was dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans, obviously hastily thrown on. A Coast Guard officer supported her under the elbow as she walked down the pier. Tricia approached her, introduced herself, and offered her condolences. Margot nodded as if not fully aware of what was happening. "Mrs. Brooks, I know this is a terrible time for you, but I need to ask you some questions," Tricia said softly. "Are you able to talk now?" Margot swallowed and nodded. Yes, of course. I want to help. I want to understand what happened to my husband." They were seated in a small cafe on the waterfront. Tricia ordered coffee for herself and tea for Margot. The woman sat clutching her cup with both hands as if trying to keep warm, even though it was a hot day. "Tell me about the last time you saw your husband," Tricia began. Margot took a deep breath. Deep. Last night, we had dinner at a restaurant on the ship, and then we had a little argument. Nothing serious, it was just... I wanted to go to the party on the top deck, and Derek was tired and wanted to go back to the cabin. So, I ended up going alone, and he went back to the room. What time was that? About 9 p.m., maybe a little later. And when did you return to the cabin? About 11:30. I thought Derek would be asleep, but he wasn't. I thought he'd changed his mind and gone to the party to look for me, but we missed each other. I waited for him until 1 o'clock in the morning. Then I started to worry and informed the staff. Trisha took notes, watching Margot's facial expression carefully. You said you had an argument. About what exactly? Margot lowered her eyes. It's silly, really. Like I said, nothing serious. I was just in the mood to have fun and he was tired. Did your husband drink a lot of alcohol? No. Margot shook her head. He hardly drank at all. A glass of wine at dinner, no more. And drugs? Never. Margot's voice became indignant. Derek was a school teacher. He was a very principled man. How would you describe your marriage, Mrs. Brooks? Margot stood still for a moment. We were happy, 7 years together. This cruise was to be our second honeymoon. Did your husband have any reason to be depressed? Problems at work? Financial difficulties? No, nothing like that. Margot shook her head. Derek loved his job. He was a good teacher and the kids adored him. We lived modestly but comfortably. Trisha scrutinized the woman in front of her. Something didn't add up. Her words, her reactions. Mrs. Brooks, I have to ask. Did you and your husband have any more serious problems that you didn't mention? Margot raised her tear-filled eyes to her. What do you mean? Quarrels, cheating, something that might have led him to think about... Trisha paused. Suicide. Suicide? Margot looked genuinely shocked. No, Derek would never. He was the most cheerful person I knew. He loved life. He loved me. It had to be an accident. Maybe he got sick, went out on the balcony to get some air, and... Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. Margot's shoulders shook with sobs. Trisha gave her time to calm down, then continued. I know this is hard, Mrs. Brooks. Just a few more questions and we'll call it a day. Did your husband have any enemies? Someone who might have wished him harm? Margot shook her head. Everyone loved Derek. He was a good man. Too good for this world. When the interview was over, Trisha walked Margot to the hotel where she was to stay for the duration of the investigation. The woman looked broken, but something in her demeanor continued to bother the detective. Back in the temporary office set up at the Key West police station, Trisha reviewed the preliminary reports. Derek Brooks's head injury was consistent with hitting the hull of a ship or the water in a fall from a height. There were no signs of struggle on the body. Blood alcohol content was moderate, but not enough to cause serious intoxication. At first glance, everything seemed to point to an accident, but Trisha Cavendish wouldn't be the lead homicide detective if she relied on first glance alone. Her musings were interrupted by a knock on the door. A young officer entered the office. Detective Cavendish? There's a man here to talk to you about the Brooks case. Says he was a friend of the deceased. Trisha nodded. Show him in. Andre Carter was a tall, athletically built man with a short haircut and attentive eyes. He was dressed in jeans and a simple polo shirt, but held himself with the dignity of a man accustomed to suits. Mr. Carter, I'm Detective Trisha Cavendish. She held out her hand. Did you know Derek Brooks? We've been best friends since college, Andre replied, shaking her hand. I was on the same cruise. As soon as I heard what happened... He shook his head without finishing the sentence. I'm sorry for your loss, Trisha said. Have a seat. How can you help the investigation? Andre sat down and thought for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. I don't think it was an accident, Detective. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't suicide. Trisha stepped forward. Why do you think that? Because I talked to Derek the night before he died. He was, troubled. Said he'd found something on Margot's cell phone. Evidence of her cheating. Trisha felt a chill run down her spine. This was it. The first piece of the puzzle. Carry on, Mr. Carter. Derek had suspected for some time. Margot had changed in recent months. She's become distant, often late for work, always checking her phone. Classic signs, you know. But Derek loved her. He wanted to believe it was just his paranoia. But then he found proof, Trisha prompted. Yeah, messages from some man called Malcolm. Love messages. Future plans. Andre clenched his fists. Derek was destroyed. He called me from the bar on the lower deck asking for advice. I told him to talk to her to figure things out. And did he? He had to. He said he was going back to his cabin for a serious talk. It was about 9 o'clock in the evening. I offered to go with him, but he refused. Said it had to be a conversation between the two of them. Trisha took notes. What do you think Derek was capable of in that state? Andre shook his head. Not suicide, that's for sure. Derek was a strong man. Yes, he was upset, but he was determined to deal with the situation. He talked about divorce, about not letting her and her lover make fun of him. He was going to fight. And Margot? What had she been like lately? Cold, calculating. Andre frowned. You know, I never understood what Derek saw in her. She always struck me as, too materialistic, always comparing their lives to those of richer people. Derek was happy with what he had. She never was. Trisha nodded. Do you know anything about a man named Malcolm? Only what Derek mentioned. He seems to be a businessman. Rich. Just what Margot had always wanted. As Andre left, Trisha leaned back in her chair, pondering the information she had received. The story was taking a very different turn. She called the department and requested a background check on all of Margot Brooks's contacts, especially men named Malcolm. The next morning, Trisha met Margot again at the hotel. The woman looked pale but more collected than the day before. Mrs. Brooks, I have a few additional questions, Trisha began. You mentioned that you returned to the cabin at about 11:30 at night and Derek wasn't there. Did you notice anything out of the ordinary? Maybe things were out of place? Margot shook her head. No, nothing like that. Everything was as usual. And the balcony door? Was it open or closed? Margot thought for a moment. Closed, I think. Yes, it was closed. I remember because I wanted to get some air, so I opened it. Trisha made a note. Mrs. Brooks, I have to ask you straight out. Do you know a man named Malcolm? Margot's reaction was immediate and obvious. Panic flashed in her eyes before she pulled herself together. Malcolm, she repeated, buying time. I'm not sure. Oh, you mean Malcolm from the office? He works in the marketing department. And what is your relationship with this Malcolm? Colleagues? Margot answered quickly. Just colleagues. Why do you ask? Trisha decided to change tactics. Mrs. Brooks, you said yesterday that you and your husband had a happy marriage. Is that true? Yes, of course. Margot straightened up. We loved each other. Then why did Derek call his friend Andre Carter the night before he died, upset about the evidence of your infidelity that had been discovered? The color drained from Margot's face. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly not knowing what to say. I don't know what you mean, she finally squeezed out. I think you understand perfectly well, Mrs. Brooks. Trisha leaned forward. Derek discovered your correspondence with your lover. He knew you were planning to leave him, and he was going to confront you. Margot swallowed. That's not true. Andre has always disliked me. He's just trying to smear me. Then let's check your phone right now, Trisha suggested. If there's nothing compromising, it'll confirm your story. No, Margot objected too quickly, then tried to soften her reaction. I mean, I don't have to show my phone. It's an invasion of privacy. Right now, Mrs. Brooks, I'm investigating a possible murder. If you have nothing to hide, checking your phone will only prove your innocence. Margot looked cornered. I want a lawyer. Trisha nodded. That's your right. But keep in mind, Mrs. Brooks, that we'll have access to your messages through the service provider anyway. The only question is how willing you are to cooperate with the investigation. Leaving Margot with that thought, Trisha returned to the office. Her team had already gathered initial information on the mysterious Malcolm. Malcolm Reed, 39 years old, a successful businessman from St. Albans, owner of an investment company. And, most interestingly, his name had popped up on the passenger list that had left the Pearl of the Caribbean in Nassau the day before Derek's death. Very convenient, isn't it? Trisha commented, looking at the report. Lover disappears from the ship the day before the husband accidentally falls overboard. The next step was to get a warrant to see the cruise ship's CCTV footage. Trisha was particularly interested in the cameras pointed at the corridor next to Brooks' stateroom and the deck areas. By late afternoon, the materials had arrived. Trisha spent several hours scrutinizing the footage. One of them clearly showed the figure of Derek entering the cabin at about 9 o'clock in the evening. Then, at about 10 hours and 15 minutes, a camera in the hallway captured Margot leaving the cabin with a visibly agitated look. She returned about 20 minutes later. What had happened in the cabin in that time, and where had Derek disappeared to? The footage from the camera pointed at the part of the deck next to Brooks's cabin had turned out to be corrupted. There was a lot of noise in the image at the critical interval between 10 and 11 o'clock in the evening. Too convenient a coincidence, Trisha muttered. She decided to take another thorough look at the cabin itself. Fortunately, the cruise company had sealed the room at her request until the investigators arrived. The deluxe stateroom was impressive in size and luxury. A large living room transitioned into a bedroom with a huge bed, a separate bathroom with a jacuzzi tub, and, of course, a balcony overlooking the ocean. Trisha put on her gloves and began a methodical inspection. At first glance, nothing suspicious. Derek's things were neatly stacked in the closet. Toothbrush, razor, aftershave in the bathroom. His book on the bedside table with a bookmark about halfway through. Looks like he was planning to get back to reading. On the bedside table was a small metal souvenir in the shape of a cruise ship, an exact replica of the Pearl of the Caribbean in miniature. Trisha took it carefully, examining it. A common tourist souvenir sold in the ship's store. She spun it around in her hands and noticed something odd. There were tiny dark dots in the folds of metal representing the decks. It was as if someone had tried to wash something off, but hadn't been able to get to all the recesses. Examination of the balcony yielded no obvious results either. The railing was quite high, almost an adult's chest. To accidentally fall over them, one would have had to lean heavily or lose their balance. Trisha returned to the room and once again scrutinized the entire space. Something caught her eye on the light-colored carpeting near the balcony door, an almost imperceptible dark spot. She pulled a special spray from her bag and treated the area. The stain glowed with a bluish light, a reaction to hemoglobin, blood. "Bingo," Trisha whispered. Further inspection with luminol revealed several other small bloodstains leading from this spot to the balcony. They had been carefully wiped away, but they could not be completely removed. Trisha carefully took samples for DNA testing. If it was Derek's blood, the pattern was completely changing. It meant that the head injury had not been sustained in the fall, but while still in the cabin, possibly as a result of a blow or struggle. Further inspection of the cabin led to another discovery. In a trash can in the bathroom, beneath other trash, Trisha found a crumpled page from a notebook. Straightening it out, she saw handwriting, clearly male. A letter, begun and unfinished. "Margot, if you're reading this, it means I have the courage to tell you the truth. I know about your affair with Malcolm. I know you were planning to leave me after the cruise. I won't beg you to stay, but I also won't let you to." That was where the letter ended. Trisha carefully packed it away as evidence. It was the last thing Derek had written before he died, and it completely confirmed Andre Carter's theory that Derek knew about the affair and was going to confront his wife. Leaving the cabin, Trisha was almost certain Derek Brooks's death was neither an accident nor a suicide. All that remained was to find hard evidence. Back at the office, she received the report on the results of the examination of the body. The cause of death was confirmed: drowning. However, the head injury was caused by a blunt object, probably before falling into the water. The nature of the injuries were not consistent with impact with the water or the ship's hull. It all fits together. Derek discovered Margot's affair, came back to the cabin for a confrontation. Something had happened, an argument, perhaps a struggle. He'd been hit in the head, and either been thrown overboard already dead or, wounded and disoriented, had fallen or been pushed into the ocean. Now it was time to find the murder weapon and get more information on the mysterious Malcolm Reed. Trisha sent out a warrant request to search the Brooks home in St. Albans and access the financial and phone records of both Margot and Malcolm. She felt she was getting closer to the truth, but the prosecution needed hard evidence. That evening, the DNA test results came back. The blood found in the cabin did indeed belong to Derek Brooks. It was a key piece of evidence, directly indicating that he had been injured while still in the cabin, not in a fall at sea. Trisha prepared an arrest warrant for Margot Brooks on suspicion of her husband's murder. Everything pointed to premeditated murder. Motive in the form of an affair with a wealthy lover, opportunity, and evidence of blood in the cabin confirming that the injury was inflicted before the fall overboard. But before going after Margot, Trisha decided to scrutinize the metal souvenir from her bedside table one more time. Her intuition told her that the dark dots in the folds of the metal might be a clue. She sent the souvenir to the lab for more detailed analysis. The results weren't long in coming. Traces of blood matching Derek Brooks's DNA were found in the recesses of the metal statuette. Trisha had a complete picture of the crime. Margot had hit her husband over the head with a heavy metal souvenir, and then, when he was disoriented or unconscious, pushed him overboard, faking an accident. She tried to wash the souvenir thoroughly, but was unable to remove all traces of blood from the small parts of the figurine, and returned it to its place, hoping that no one would suspect an ordinary tourist souvenir. It was the key piece of evidence, irrefutably proving that Derek's death wasn't accidental. Someone had hit him on the head with this heavy metal object with enough force to cause serious injury, and then, probably already injured or unconscious, pushed him overboard to stage an accident. Malcolm Reed's office was located in downtown St. Albans, a glass building with tinted windows and tight security at the entrance. Trisha Cavendish showed her ID to the guard and took the elevator to the 12th floor. A receptionist with perfect hair and a cold stare tried to stop her. "Mr. Reed has an appointment. You need to make an appointment. I'm sure he'll make time for me," Trisha replied, showing her badge. "Detective Cavendish, St. Albans PD." Malcolm Reed greeted her with a flawless smile that didn't affect his eyes. He was exactly as she'd imagined, tall, immaculately dressed, with the confidence of a man used to getting what he wanted. "What can I do for the police?" he asked, pointing to the chair across from his massive, dark wood desk. "I'm investigating the death of Derek Brooks," Trisha said, watching his reaction carefully. Not a muscle flinched on Reed's face. "Brooks? I'm not sure I'm familiar with the man. What about his wife? Margot Brooks?" A slight pause, almost imperceptible, but Trisha caught it. "Margot? Yeah, I think she works for the insurance company we work with. I may have met her at business events." Trisha pulled a picture out of a folder. "That's you on the Pearl of the Caribbean cruise ship 2 days before Derek Brooks died. In the photo, Malcolm Reed was standing at the bar talking to another man. In the distance, almost at the edge of the photo, Margot's figure was visible. I travel a lot," Reed shrugged. "This cruise was part of a business trip. I left the ship in Nassau because I had meetings on the island." "Very convenient," Trisha remarked. "You leave the ship the day before the husband of the woman you're having an affair with accidentally falls overboard." Reed's gaze turned hard. "I don't know what you're implying, Detective. If you have specific accusations, I'd prefer to hear them in the presence of my attorney." "No charges yet, Mr. Reed. Just gathering information. Like the texts you sent to Margot Brooks over the last year, about your plans to be together after you were rid of your husband." "That's absurd." Reed stands up. "I demand that you leave my office immediately." Trisha calmly stood up. "Of course, but I must warn you. We have a warrant to access your phone records and email. I suggest you prepare a good lawyer. I think you're going to need one." As she left the building, Trisha felt the ice breaking. Reed was clearly nervous, despite his best efforts to keep his cool. She was sure he would be contacting Margot soon, and that was exactly what they were waiting for. Margot's phone was under surveillance. There was an officer from the technical department waiting for her at the police station. "Detective, we have results!" Reed called Margot Brooks right after you left. The conversation was brief but informative. He said, "The police have been here. They know about us. Don't say anything without a lawyer." Trisha smiled. Albeit indirectly, they had gotten confirmation of the connection between Reed and Margot. Now they needed to line up the entire sequence of events and find evidence of collusion. She spread crime scene photos, expert reports, and phone records on the table. As an experienced detective, Trisha knew that murders were often solved not by one decisive piece of evidence, but through a multitude of small details that, when put together, created an incontrovertible picture. In her notebook, she already had a crime pattern. Motive: Margot wanted to get rid of her husband for a relationship with the wealthy Malcolm Reed. Opportunity: the isolated setting of a cruise ship. Weapon: A metal souvenir, a model ship, alibi, faked accident. But something was still bothering Trisha. Was it a spontaneous outburst of rage when Derek found out about the affair, or a coldly planned murder? The answer came unexpectedly. Among Margot's belongings taken from the hotel room was a day planner. In it, Trisha found a note dated a month before the cruise. Reservation confirmed. Room with balcony. And another, more bizarre entry 2 weeks later, M will go to Nassau, all things considered. These entries, combined with the fact that Margot had insisted on a cabin with a balcony and had paid for the expensive cruise herself, indicated careful planning. This was not an impulsive act. Margot had originally planned to get rid of her husband on this trip. A week into the investigation, Trisha felt she had enough evidence to arrest Margot Brooks, but she wanted more, wanted a full confession that would leave the jury in no doubt. For that, she had devised a special strategy. The day Margot was to return to St. Albans, Trisha was waiting for her at the Brooks house. The small but cozy house was exactly as she had imagined. Pictures of the happy couple on the walls, bookshelves filled with math books and children's literature, a piano in the corner of the living room. The home of a man who loved the simple pleasures of life. The sound of a key in the lock made Trisha straighten in her chair. Margot entered, dragging her suitcase behind her, and froze when she saw the detective in her living room. "What are you doing here?" she asked, quickly gaining control of herself. "How did you get in?" "Search warrant," Trisha replied, showing the document. "Have a seat, Mrs. Brooks. We need to talk." Margot slowly lowered herself onto the couch, keeping her purse in her hands. "I've already told you everything, and my lawyer advised me not to talk to the police again without his presence." "That's your right," Trisha nodded. "But I thought you might like to know that we've spoken to Malcolm Reed." Margot's face twitched faintly. "I don't understand what that man has to do with my husband's death." "I think you do." Trisha opened a folder of documents. "We have proof of your connection, phone records, emails, witnesses who saw you together on the ship, and most interestingly, a recording of your last phone conversation where he warns you about the police visit." Margot pressed her lips together but remained silent. "As for your husband's death," Trisha continued, "we have irrefutable evidence that it wasn't an accident. Derek's blood on the carpet in the cabin, his blood on the metal souvenir, the same one you washed so thoroughly but failed to clean completely. And of course, the security footage showing that you left the cabin after 9 p.m. and didn't return until 20 minutes later. Enough time to get rid of the evidence. It can all be explained." Margot's voice shook. "Of course," Trisha agreed. "And I'm going to give you that opportunity. But first I want you to know that we've also talked to Malcolm about his financial situation." That statement clearly took Margot by surprise. "What does that have to do with his finances?" "Oh, that's the interesting part." Trisha leaned forward. "You see, Mr. Reed's company is on the verge of bankruptcy. He owes millions to creditors. All this time he's been lying to you, giving you the illusion of wealth and success. Cars leased, house mortgaged, accounts nearly empty." It was a lie, but Trisha saw how her words struck Margot. "You know what the funny thing is? When we told him about our suspicions of your involvement in your husband's murder, he immediately offered to cooperate in exchange for a plea bargain." "What?" Margot straightened up. "He couldn't." "He could," Trisha cut her off. "And he did. Told us how you planned the murder, how you promised him that Derek's insurance would solve all the financial problems, how you insisted on acting during the cruise." Margot's face contorted with rage. "The bastard! It was his idea all along!" Trisha was inwardly triumphant, but outwardly remained calm. "His idea?" "Yes!" Margot jumped up, waving her arms. "He spent months convincing me that Derek was standing in the way of our happiness, that we could live like kings with his money and my insurance. He said it would take too long to get a divorce, that Derek would fight for every penny. And then he suggested a cruise. He said it was perfect, said it was the perfect place. No witnesses, just an accident." She faltered, suddenly realizing what she'd said. Slowly, she sank back onto the couch, her face pale. "I want a lawyer," she whispered. "Of course." Trisha stood up. "Margot Brooks, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Derek Brooks. You have the right to remain silent." Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." 2 days later, thanks to the evidence gathered and Margot's partial confession, both herself and Malcolm Reed were arrested on charges of conspiracy to murder and first-degree murder. Tricia was sitting in her office finalizing her report when Andre Carter stopped by to see her. "I heard you got them," he said. "Both of them?" "Yes," Tricia nodded. "The evidence was overwhelming. Besides, they've started to testify against each other, hoping for a lighter sentence." Andre shook his head. "Derek always saw the good in people, even her. I don't know what he'd say now." "Maybe that he finally saw the real her," Tricia replied. Andre nodded and was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What do you think is in store for them? Given all the evidence, the premeditated nature of the crime and the extreme cruelty," Tricia shrugged. "I'd say life without parole. For both of them." Andre took a deep breath. "Fair enough. It won't bring Derek back, though." "No," Tricia agreed, "but the killers won't go unpunished. That's all the law can do." He nodded and headed for the exit, but stopped at the door. "Thank you, Detective, for everything you did for Derek." "I was just doing my job," Tricia replied, but she knew that wasn't entirely true. Every case, every victim left a mark on her soul, and she always remembered that behind the dry reports and legal terms were human lives and tragedies. The trial of Margot Brooks and Malcolm Reed was one of the most high-profile trials in the history of St. Albans. The press dubbed it the Caribbean Widow Case. New details emerged. It turned out that Margot had taken out additional insurance on Derek shortly before the cruise. Malcolm really had serious financial problems and hoped to get out of debt with Margot's help. It took the jury only 3 hours to reach a verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge, given the gravity of the crime and the complete lack of remorse on the part of the defendants, sentenced both to life in prison without parole. Margot and Malcolm were sent to different state prisons. Rumor has it that within a month of beginning their imprisonment, they broke off all contact with each other, blaming each other for the failure of their plan. The school where Derek taught established a scholarship in his name for talented students from low-income families. Each year, the top 3 graduates were given the opportunity to continue their college education. Andre Carter joined the board of trustees of the fund and personally participated in the selection of candidates. Brooks's house was sold, and the proceeds, by court order, went to charity, to a children's hospice, where Derek regularly worked as a volunteer. His pupils erected a memorial bench in the park where he liked to have extra lessons in warm weather. Life at St. Albans gradually returned to normal. New incidents occupied the front pages of the newspapers. New crimes demanded police attention. But Tricia Cavendish never forgot the Derek Brooks case. It reminded her that sometimes the worst betrayals come from those who promise to love and care, and that justice, however belated, must be served. Derek's picture stood on her desk next to other solved cases, a silent reminder that behind every victim is a story that deserves to be told, and that every person, even in death, deserves justice. On clear days, as the sun illuminated the photograph, Tricia sometimes wondered, had Derek ever guessed that the woman he loved so much was planning his murder? Did he ever assume for a moment that his life was valued only by the amount of insurance? She hoped not. That his last thoughts were not of betrayal but of something light and good, like the rest of his short life. One day, a year after the case was over, Tricia received an unusual letter. In an envelope with no return address was a simple postcard with a view of the ocean and a single phrase, "Thank you for not letting them get away with it." There was no signature, but somehow Tricia knew it was from someone who genuinely loved Derek, perhaps a coworker, a student, or just a friend whose life was better because of this kind man. She placed the card next to the photo. Let it be a reminder that even the darkest stories have room for light and gratitude, and that her work, with all its hardships and emotional weight, matters. Because justice isn't just an abstract concept. It's something that empowers people to move on with their lives, knowing that the world still makes sense,